excited to be able to bring another class to you. This is the summer solstice class. We're going to be drawing some sunflowers and painting some sunflowers, and I'm really excited to show you a little bit about the process before we get started. I want to go over a little bit about the different examples I have here and also the materials that are within your packet. We have some watercolors. We'll be doing a still life of flowers, and so we have a blank piece of paper that's watercolor paper in your packet. You also have some pencil, some brushes, and the actual watercolor paint. You'll also have a clear cup of water, or just a cup of water where you can see the color of your water as you're working. Paper towels are really important too. If you have a substrate or some sort of hard cardboard, or this is masonite, it's helpful when you're drawing and painting. So that's all the materials that you'll be using, and I'm going to go into a little bit more about the process. Okay, so before we get started with some painting, some watercolor painting, we're going to be doing a value study or a black and white study. Here I have the image of the sunflowers in black and white, and here I have it as an outline. I'm going to be showing you a little bit about how to draw the outline, and then we're going to be adding value to this worksheet that is in your packet. So it's really important to have a small little sketch, similar to how we have here, of our still life for our flowers that we're painting. The reason why is because it helps you to identify what's darker, what's lighter, and that helps you to mix color better. So I'm going to start off with this small sheet of paper that I have. And I'm doing an outline on my paper, something that's similar to this ratio. So it's taller than it is wide. This is called a portrait orientation. If it was like this, it would be called a landscape orientation. So this one's going to be a portrait orientation. And the type of painting that we're doing today is technically called a still life. So that's when we draw or paint objects from real life. And so in this setting, it's flowers that we're painting as a still life. So I'm just drawing out a small outline of my work, or to prepare for the work. And when I start to do my drawing, I usually do these big shapes to identify where these sunflowers are. So I'm kind of going around the edge of the entire flower, not just the inside. So I'm going to go around the edge of the entire flower, this big shape here. I think I made this one a little bit small, so I'm going to make it a little bigger. Sometimes I use these sharp lines, but I'm not pressing on my pencil too hard, because if I press too hard, it's going to be really hard to erase that later. So I'm just drawing these big shapes, and I'm erasing a little bit of what was there, the lines that I didn't think were the right size. And then I start to draw the inside of the flower. And once I get to this point, I kind of see the two flower heads, for lack of better terms, and then I start to also draw in those stems that are right here. I can also draw the shape of this larger petal that's here. And this just helps you set up your overall drawing for when you get started on the painting. And then after that, I start to add the different petals from the flower, the pointy edges of the petals. And you can also notice that some of them are slanted a little bit more and kind of like falling into the flower a little bit. And you can work all around your drawing. You don't have to stay in one place. It's actually good to jump around a little bit because it helps you to make sure that your size and your scale is good relative to each other. So that's why we started with those big shapes first inside of this larger rectangle, is so that we can find out what size that flower really is. And you don't have to draw every single petal. It's okay to, have your own perspective on it. It's nice to get the right shape though. So you can see right here that the flower kind of dips in this area. And you can, but you don't have to slowly start to erase that big shape that was there. It was just kind of to help you while you were finding where the placement of everything was. I'm also drawing the inside of this sunflower. You can see it here a little bit. Sometimes it gets a little bit darker, so I'm going to start to shade that in a little, because that is definitely one of the darker areas in the painting. And I'm going to shade the middle of this as well. So here's where we start to go into a little bit about shading and light and dark. And I'm going to keep doing the outline for these petals. Add a couple behind these ones. Going to move on to this other flower up here. And try to follow the shape that these petals have. It might look a little bit strange, but these areas are actually the most interesting parts once you have your painting started and start adding color. So I'm just using my pencil to find where the flower petals are located on the paper. And like I started in the beginning, I used those big shapes to find out where each petal was going to go later. So that's why we start with these small drawings, is to try and find out where the placement is. Here I'm filling in the inside of this flower because it helps me see the shapes a little bit better. If you have a photocopier at home too, sometimes what I do is draw the outline, and then on top I do the value or black and white study too. So you can make a copy of this one and then try it multiple times. Okay, so there's my general drawing. Now I'm going to go into the value a little bit more, so the light and dark. So this part of this flower is definitely a lot darker than this area. You can still see a lot of the area where the seeds of the sunflower come out in this flower. So I'm going to add a little bit more detail. Not drawing every single little circle, but a few circles in there. And I'm going to add some value to this flower because this flower is definitely a lot darker than the other flower on the left side. And I'm going to add some darkness back here as well, behind the sunflowers. And I'm trying to make sure not to go outside of this line that I have on the edges, because that helps me get a better sense for what size my paper is going to be, and it helps me to keep everything a little bit contained. Okay. So, like I was showing you on this one, I'm going to show you a little bit on how it works on this larger paper. So here we're going to be shading in the areas that are darker than the paper color. This part is significantly darker, the inside of the sunflower. And you know, it's okay that I'm going over the line. The main part of this is to just identify and see what areas are lighter and darker. So you can see already that the flower starts to pop forward because the paper is like paper white. The flowers are a little bit darker, and this is the darkest area. With my pencil, I can't get too dark, but with paint, you can definitely get a lot darker. So I invite you to, complete the entire value study with this worksheet that's provided for you in the packet. But I won't be going into too much more detail on this value study because we want to get started on some color. So I'm just going to be going into it a little bit more. Again, this might feel redundant or feel like you're doing it too many times, but it really does help you to make a better painting and a better final product at the end of the day. So it's really important. And you can do this with any flowers you have around the house. You know, you can take pictures of them and then print them. It's really helpful to do a lot of practice with different types of flowers, not just sunflowers. These ones are just kind of, more graphic and a little bit easier to draw the shapes. So you see on this stem, on the left side, it's a little bit lighter, and on the right side, it's a little darker. Same thing with here. And that's really what helps you feel like the form is three-dimensional, or like it's coming off of the paper. And you can see here that this side of the flower is a lot lighter than this part of the other flower. So I'm going to make this part a little darker. And that stays lighter. Again, I can't get super dark with my pencil, but it still helps to kind of see how everything works together. You can also make this background darker so those flowers pop out a little bit more. Okay, so yeah, this is just a general value study. It helps you to prepare for your painting, and we're going to get started on some painting. So we're going to get started on our painting, and we have our small sketch, our reference image in black and white. We also have this other image that we did in a drawing, black and white, and we're going to be using our color photo to be drawing a very light outline of our sunflower. And so you're going to be using this larger sheet of paper to do that. I've already have this prepped for the painting, but I did go over that step by step on how to get your outline. Remember to start with these really big shapes of circles, and then start to do smaller circles inside, and then start to add the detail to the petals. So once you get to this point of having your outline, we're going to get started with some color. So you really want to have your color image beside you as reference when you're doing some color painting. And the different brushes that we have available are these ones are called flat brushes. They're usually really square. These ones are angle brushes. They have an angle like diagonally. These ones are called round brushes. They come in different sizes, really small or really big. All of them come in different sizes. This one is also an angle, another flat brush, and a fine detailed brush that's a little bit more pointy. You also have some watercolors, black, brown, purple, blue, green, yellow, orange, and red. If you do not have, if you only have this part to your packet, it's okay. Just use a plastic plate instead of this plate. Make sure it's not made of paper, a paper plate. Make sure it's a plastic plate, because it'll just absorb in there and you won't be able to mix any color. Even paper plates that have like a wax to them probably could work, but plastic is probably better. You'll also need a cup of water, and you might want to have 2 cups of water, one that's a little bit clean than the other, and some paper towels to clean your brush often. That's the key to watercolors, is to always clean your brushes and have clean water and paper towels so that you could mix your color correctly, and so that it doesn't get all muddy and start to not look like the painting that you want it to look like. So yeah, we're going to start with our color picture. I'm going to grab a round brush so that I could do some swatches of color around my painting. So I'm going to start with wetting my brush, getting a little bit of that water off of the brush, water and some of this yellow. And what I'm noticing is that there's some that is yellow, and then some that's more like of an orangish yellow. So first I'm just going to start off with my yellow color. It doesn't look too orange, it's more on the yellow side. And I'm going to put it in my lightest areas, because that's where I see that it's a little less orange than in the darker areas of the sunflower. So I'm adding it in here. I'm gonna also add it on this side. And I'm not pressing down too hard. I'm just trying to press lightly and not keep my brush on the paper for too long. These parts are a little bit light, but not too light, so. Okay, so I have those areas, and I'm going to be mixing a darker yellow that has more orange in it. So I'm going to grab some water and put the orange on the side of the yellow. Oops. And I'm going to mix both of these colors. I'm going to clean my brush because I can tell that I need more yellow. So you want to clean your brush really well before you go to a lighter color, or else you'll dirty the colors and then you'll have to clean it before you get started again. So I'm grabbing more yellow. And adding it off to the side, and I'm starting to mix it again into that orange. So I'm using that orangish yellow for the darker areas. You always want to start off lighter than what it is, because if not, then you'll go too dark and then you can't go back with watercolor. So I'm just looking at my color picture and trying to see what part was lighter, what part is darker. Again, that's why we did these smaller studies, is because we can see it in black and white, like, oh, this part is definitely a lot darker than this part, right? And there's even little small areas of light and smaller areas of dark too. So you want to keep all of that in mind. Adding some darker, and again I have to mix my color all over again. And yes, you likely won't get the same color each time, and that's okay. It's actually better, in my opinion, that you don't get the same color each time, because it helps you to learn how to mix color more every time. Oops. My bad. So I'm mixing again the yellow and the orange. And I'm going to go in and add it into other areas. I'm going to put more orange in there. These parts are a little bit darker. I'm grabbing more yellow. Okay, so now I have the general yellow shape of my sunflowers. And one thing I want to point out is the yellow in the light areas is a lot cooler, and the yellow in the dark areas is a lot warmer. Usually it's the opposite, but because we're painting the color yellow, that's kind of how it works for this painting. So when you're painting, you want to identify how we can actually have a warm color and a cool color. When it's a red, you can have a warm red or a cool red. A warm red is maybe like the color of a tomato. And then a cool red is probably the color of a cherry. So those two colors are good examples of how you can have a warm orange and a cool orange. You can have a warm blue and a cool blue. Another example is maybe like a cobalt, like the background of this this backdrop. And then you have ultramarine, which is a lot more warmer. So cobalt is cooler, ultramarine is warmer. So that's really important when it comes to painting. And here I'm going to be painting the stalk of the sunflower. So I'm trying to see, this color is a little bit too blue for the shadow of the stalk or the stem of the sunflower. I'm going to try and add some orange to it to make it a little bit warmer. And I'm going to add some to this side too. And I'm extending it down lower a little bit. So I added some blue and green with the orange to get a warmer green for the shadow side. And yeah. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and grab my white watercolor. So you should have had a small white watercolor for this set. So I'm cleaning my brush before I use it. And I'm wetting the watercolor paint and using it on my on my plastic plate. And I'm going to use it to mix a lighter version of this green. So I had some green and yellow, and I'm using some white. I can see that I probably need a little bit more green and a little more yellow. I'm using a little bit of that orange from the sunflower, and I'm painting this side of the stem or the stalk of the sunflower. Okay. I'm cleaning my brush again. And I'm going to start adding some dark areas for the center of the sunflower. I'm going to mix that on the side using brown. And I think a little bit of orange too. So I'm going to use some brown on there before I go too dark. I think it's important to just map it out with a color, and then you can see after how much darker you have to go. And when you're painting, something that one of my first uh, professors or teachers told me is no one's going to end up looking at the picture that you were painting from. They're only going to look at your painting. So you can definitely take some liberties with that and, you know, make it look how you want it to look. There isn't only one way of doing these paintings, and the way that you end up having your painting at the end is how you decided to do it and how it looks like because you made it. So it's everyone's an individual and they all paint differently. So I'm adding the center. I kind of like how light it is. I'm still going to add those dark areas in the middle. And instead of black, I'm actually going to use a little bit of purple to make that brown darker. And as you can see, I'm not covering all of the white in my painting. Sometimes that can look kind of interesting. Feel free to cover all those edges if you want to, but I just think it can look interesting. I'm grabbing some more purple and brown, mixing that together. Again, I'm just dabbing the paint. I'm not pushing down really hard. Just layering each color on top of each other. The other thing I want to mention is you definitely don't want to have too much water on your brush, or else your paper is going to start warping, and that doesn't go too well. So you want to make sure you don't have too much water on your brush. And what else? Yeah, if you do have too much water on your brush and your paper gets really wet, just let it dry and come back to it later. So grabbing more brown and some black. And I'm going to make this flower a little darker and a little bit in here too. Grabbing mostly just some brown. Okay. All right, so now we have the center and the general overall color. I'm actually not going to make this background in the painting. I'm just going to leave it a blue sky, but I'm going to do that towards the end of the painting. For now, I'm going to grab a smaller brush, more of a fine detail brush, and I'm going to grab some more of that yellow and the orange so that I could make these petals a little bit more pronounced. So I'm going to add some small swatches coming out of the flower from the center. And it's essentially adding more shadows to the flower and to the petals. I'm even going to grab a little bit of red to go a little darker for some areas. So I'm using a warmer orangish yellow for the shadows, and I'm leaving the part from earlier alone. I'm not touching that part because that's the lightest yellow, and I don't want to add any more yellow to that. I'm going to grab a different type of brush. I'm going to go back to the round brush. And I'm mixing again the orange and the red. A little bit of yellow as well in there. And I'm adding some darker color. Now if you think that this orangish yellow is a little bit too bright, we can definitely add a little bit of the brown into it so that it's not as saturated or not as bright. So all of these areas are pretty much in a darker color. Behind here, there's also some petals that are a little darker. I think this area is a little darker too. And I'm just dabbing around where there was some wet paint so that I could use it for the areas that are surrounding it. And now I think I'm going to add a little bit more for the leaves in the background. I'm mixing some blue and green, and I think a little bit of brown to make it a more earthy green. And I'm adding some of those leaves from the sunflower. Making this shadow on here a little darker. And yeah, I'm just kind of making up these shapes of the flower a little bit, and it helps to have this round brush. And I think I might add this leaf that was up in the front. And I'm cleaning my brush before I start to mix a new color. Grabbing some blue and adding it to that white that I had left over. I'm going to make the blue a little bit darker at the bottom and lighter at the top. So I'm just filling in the background. Trying to not go over the other colors that I had there. And it's okay if you do. And watercolor, you definitely see more of your brush stroke rather than like other types of paint like acrylic paint or oil paint or gouache. So all of your brush strokes are going to show up. If you don't like that texture, you might want to try a different medium. But watercolors are great. You can also take little small packs and take them with you to the park, do some studies at the park. That's COVID safe. And making it a little bit lighter at the top. So I'm using less paint and more water, but try not to use too much water in your brush at one time, because it'll start to run down if you're not careful. And you can also paint with your painting down a little bit too. It helps to not make the paint run too much. Gonna mix a little bit more blue in there. Also, some people really hate when the pencil shows through. I personally kind of like it, but if you don't like that much pencil showing through, you can also use the detail brush to draw out your sunflower. It's just a little bit more tricky, and you want to make sure it's very lightly drawn. You can use yellow to lightly draw it. That helps you not go too dark. Sometimes people use blue. And yeah, I'm going to add a little bit more detail on these flower petals. Getting some brown and cleaning my brush. Going to grab some yellow. So using that yellow and brown to go in and do a little bit more drawing with my fine detail brush to accentuate those petals a little bit more. So add a little bit more shadow to those petals. I can use a little purple too for this darker area. Oops, it's a little too dark. So I just wiped my brush and got some water, and I'm using that paint still, but just trying to mix it around a little bit more because it was a little too dark. Also, I think I'm going to make this flower a little darker on the side. And probably add a little to this one too. Also getting blue and green and a little brown. And I'm gonna finish drawing the stem back here. And yeah, so I'm just adding a little bit more darkness to these leaves so that the flowers pop out a little bit more. But we're pretty much done. We have 2 sunflowers and our background. You can go in and add some more detail for your petals, but that's pretty much it. We have the 2 shapes, and we started off with our drawing, and we ended up with a color painting in watercolor. Again, thank you for watching. My name is Cynthia Lujan. I'm really excited to see the paintings that you all make, and please feel free to join us here at the Senior Center in the future after COVID. We really hope to have you in our class, and I'm really excited to see you in person soon.